there's always one golden thread and in any business, and any business owner needs to stay close to their business.
I want to speak about cash flow because that is the lifeline of every single business.
You need a franchisor to support you in difficult times.
Welcome to SME PowerTalk, the podcast where we have real conversations with people shaping South Africa's business landscape. Today's guest brings nearly 3 decades of experience in banking and franchising and has a deep understanding of what it takes to make small and medium-sized businesses grow and thrive, especially in today's challenging economy. He is the sector executive for wholesale, retail and franchise at Absa Business Banking, and his name is Mr. James Noble. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So you have had a journey in banking and franchising, and I just want to start with you maybe telling us a bit about that, how you got into the banking sector, and perhaps later on we'll move into franchising.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, I think it was it has been quite an interesting journey, and it was by default that I landed here. And I did study a e-commerce degree, and obviously always wanted to work with numbers, but never thought of banking. And then by default, I ended up in banking. And I was also very fortunate at the time. I just graduated, and they started a new division at Absa, the franchise division, and they were looking for young students to come in and lead or build this division from scratch. So there was a couple of us nationally that then started. And over the years, the industry just stuck to me. I grew a lot of passion for franchise businesses in general, and for SME businesses as well. And then I went through the ranks by being a franchise specialist in a region, eventually looking after a region, being a regional manager, eventually moved to Joburg from Cape Town, and being the national franchise sales manager. And over the years managed to then build up to where I'm currently, where I'm the executive for wholesale, retail and franchise.
And I mean, nearly 3 decades in the industry, that is some serious mileage there. So what have you noticed in terms of trends? What has changed the game completely at the moment?
I think the big change for me is obviously the digitalization, everything moving from manual to digital, to moving to online. I think also a big change was over the years, the competition that started coming in. I remember in 1997, 1998, financing a business, and within month 1, the business is profitable. And it takes a bit longer for businesses to be profitable, and because there's a lot more competition, and you even have corporates competing with franchise businesses, and that making it quite interesting and challenging for franchise owners as well.
And I know that, Absa has a very focused approach when it comes to supporting businesses in different sectors. And what do you think has helped, businesses and franchises in particular stay ahead of the curve?
I think the big thing, especially in the franchise world, is that brand recognition is very important. The strength of a brand differentiate it from other brands. I always use the example of a client that I once financed, where they had a family business, independent grocery business, for nearly 30 years. And then when the younger generation started coming in, they decided but they need to convert this business into something different if they really want to grow the business. And they decided on the Pick n Pay brand. And by just putting up the Pick n Pay signage on the building, they nearly doubled their turnover. And then once they finished the revamp and upgrade to a full-on Pick n Pay franchise, then the turnover of that business more than fourfold increased. So I think that the brand recognition is very, very important. It can be good for you. but also if something bad happens, it can be bad for
Yes,
everyone.
for everyone.
Yeah.
And I mean, with what you're saying, brand recognition is very important because those are brands that we grew up with, brands that we trust, from an early age. And you almost think that franchises are fail-proof because you've got the backing of a big brand. But I understand that you have also been on the other side as a franchise owner. What was that journey like for you?
I think it is. It's always important not to just be on the one side. You need to put your foot in the pond and feel what it's like on the other side. And it was an interesting journey for me. I learned quite a lot from being a business owner myself. By that time, I was already 13 years in franchising and funding franchise businesses. And you think after 10 or 13 years, you know everything. But once you step into your own business, it's totally different because you need to manage people, you need to do your own marketing, especially the regional marketing, because the franchisor normally only does the national marketing.
Okay.
And that day-to-day operation, keeping your customers happy and understanding what's happening in your area, knowing your area. And I think also important to understand that you need a franchisor to support you in difficult times. But I think, for me, that was quite interesting, being on the other side. And what I also learned was that it's not just only providing a funding solution to a business owner. You need to look at the solution holistically. So you need to look at the transactional banking, the online banking, and how do you manage your cash? How do you manage your card acquiring as well? And the support that you need from a bank. If you're in a retail business, you need support. These days, some of the businesses are open 24/7, so you need support 24/7, and you can't just support 5 days of the week. And I think that helped me to understand what it is from a banking perspective that it is that we need to deliver on.
And once again, being on the other side, then how has that helped you in terms of the advice that you give to entrepreneurs, to business leaders that you interact with, to franchise owners, in terms of helping them unlock growth and create sustainable success?
I think that the one thing is that a lot of business owners get emotional about their business, and the lines start to become blurred, and they don't look at the facts because I was in my own business and I did quite well in the early years, but I think I was also maybe in the wrong business at the wrong time.
Okay.
Because that type of business is no longer around anymore. And I had to make hard decisions towards the end because I had to look at the numbers and realize that it's not worth my while throwing good money after a bad case. And you need to know when to stop or when to maybe do something different and continue. And I think that's the big thing for me is that as business owners, you sometimes need to listen to external advice as well. I've seen it even with franchise brands that's no longer around, where the CEOs or the starters or founders of those brands, they did not have all the knowledge to manage all the different areas of the business, and they were not really looking at the data in the business, telling them what's happening with the business, and eventually they crash and burn as well. So I think it's important that you need to understand where the gaps are, and that you need to be proactive in addressing those gaps in your business, because over time they can become quite big problems.
And that is actually very valuable advice because sometimes, you go into something thinking because you've had success before in other businesses that you know it all and that you can do it all. So what you've said now is very important, that, there are some things that you really need to learn from other people and leave to the experts as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay. And then earlier on, you also spoke about retail businesses. And I just want you to clarify what a retail business is, because I think we are familiar with what franchises are. But what is a retail business?
So I think it's important to understand, if you look at, so wholesale retail franchise is basically the trade sector. And the trade sector consists out of a lot of subsectors. In our world, we've got four major subsectors that we focus on. The one is the food and beverage sector. And under food and beverage, you've got a couple of subsectors as well, like restaurants and quick service restaurants and the liquor trade. Another major subsector is the automotive sector. There we predominantly focus on dealerships, aftermarket businesses, and then the fuel industry. And then you also have your FMCG, wholesale and retail businesses. That's predominantly your grocery type businesses, DIY and hardware, pharmaceutical industry, as well as your second-hand goods. And then there's your consumer services subsector or major sector. And under consumer services, there's quite a long list of subsectors there. But there we predominantly focus on health and beauty, your telecoms industry, as well as the funeral industry. So franchising is also, I would like to say, not an industry on its own. Franchising is a business model that goes across just retail. So you can even get franchises in transport and logistics, or in manufacturing. So it's not just restricted to retail. It's a business model within those subsectors.
And so when I introduced you earlier on, I said that you know how to help small and medium-sized businesses grow and thrive in today's challenging economy. And I said challenging economy on purpose because, I think we need to be honest. In terms of business now, times are tough. Profit margins may be a bit tighter than what they used to be, a few years ago. How do you help franchise owners, beat this and stay ahead of it?
Yeah, I think one of the big things over the last 15 years actually is the concern about the cost to actually operate a business. And one of the big expenses in any business is that banking or bank expense line. And I think always from a banking perspective, you need to look at how you can tailor your products that it's still cost effective. But I think also that you get more value for what you actually get or ask from your bank. And that's why, especially if I can use an example, like for instance, card acquiring, your merchant services, where it's not just a device where you swipe your card or tap your card these days, or tap your phone, but and that comes at a cost. So how can we add value there? And there we can look at maybe do 7-day banking, for instance, where before the norm was that we only bank 5 days of the week when it comes to card transactions. Now the retailer has the benefit of receiving cash earlier into his bank account, and that enables them to use less working capital, because working capital overdraft facilities is quite expensive. So I think, from our side, it is how we can add value, and for it to be still cost effective for the franchise owner or business owner.
And then I want to speak about cash flow, because that is the lifeline of every single business. But, unfortunately, people go into business not knowing how to manage cash flow. First of all, you're not used to receiving money every day. For example, if you receive money on a daily basis, income may be irregular as well. What are some of the common mistakes that you see business owners making when it comes to cash flow, and how can we avoid them?
Yeah, I think and cash flow is the most important thing, I would say, in a business. A lot of business owners just look at the turnover that they're doing, and I think they're doing very well. But you need to start going into the detail. What are the actual margins that you are making? It's important to understand that there's no losses from a stock perspective, because that will influence your gross profit. Then it becomes also very important from an expenses perspective to manage your expenses very, very tightly, because that can eventually influence your net profit in your business. So it becomes very important that you manage your cash flow, and that you understand what is coming in every day and also what is going out, so that you don't spend more than what is actually coming into the business.
Into the business, yeah. And you also did mention 7-day settlements, where before we used to bank mainly for 5 days, but now Absa has introduced 7-day settlements and pocket flow analytics. Now, how does having a faster access to money, because we all want money very quick and very fast, but and just also having better data, how does that actually change the way that business owners make decisions?
So I think, and that's where being data-led becoming so important, because to get access to that kind of data through some of these geospatial companies, you will pay thousands of rands to get those reports on a monthly basis. Where through Absa we offer that at a very reasonable rate of about 40-50 rand per month, and that is to understand how do you fit into with your competitors in your area. Is your competitors, or are your competitors growing, or are you maybe declining, or is your turnover declining? So it's quite important to understand where do you fit into that whole ecosystem, and let's say if your turnover is declining, is it something that's happening in that market? Because you do get some markets that become mature, or the markets shift or move to other areas, and then you need to stay up to speed and make sure that you can move with where the curve is moving towards. And that also informs you how you should be doing your marketing. Who your clientele is. Is it a younger generation? Is it an older generation? And that will also determine how you do your marketing, because the youngsters are all on social media, where your older people would still like to see something maybe in the post box or whatever the case might be, or to get a SMS, and the youngsters are not into that.
And yes, of course, where you actually unlock your post box and receive actual mail. And even when it comes to social media, I mean, there are platforms, for example, Facebook, which is considered for older or maybe more mature people. And then you have TikTok and Instagram and X, which is for younger people as well. So you're right, it is important to know that. But I want to move on to the big word, because this is something that each and every single business owner, when you ask them about the challenges that they face, one of the things that they mention almost first is funding, right? And funding can either unlock growth or it can stop it in its tracks. Now, if I am going to Absa and I am looking for funding, which may be a very daunting process as well, especially for something that I'm not exposed to, what do I need to know and be prepared for?
So I think there's different stages of applying for funding at a bank. So if you're a startup, then obviously there's much more information needed than when you are an existing business and you are actually growing your business. And there's always all these uncertainties when it's a startup type of business, even if it's a franchise business, because you never know, is it going to be successful or not? The chances are that it is bigger for it to be successful if it's a franchise. But it's important to, again, you need to understand your market dynamics. And you also need to make sure that the business can actually afford to repay that loan. And I think the other important thing is also that everyone wants to be in business and you work hard. So at the end of the month, you actually want to take a salary out of this business. And can that business actually afford your lifestyle? And we quite often see people that want to step into franchising from a corporate job, and where they were earning maybe 50,000 Rand a month, but the business they're stepping into can only afford to pay them maybe 30,000 Rand a month. So it's always important to make sure that the business can actually afford your lifestyle, because it's very difficult to step down in lifestyle,
yes,
compared to your stepping up into a bigger lifestyle. And then when it comes to the funding part, for startups, it's always important in the franchising world. We normally work on a 50-50 ratio when it comes to gearing a business. So if the setup cost of the business is 3 million, the bank will most probably look at funding up to 1.5 million for for that business. But there's other considerations as well. You need to look at there's maybe a deposit that you need to pay to a landlord. And these days, landlords are quite strict when it comes to that because they want 3 to 6 months rental deposit.
Yes.
So then you need to make, on top of the 3 million setup, you need to make provision for 3 to 6 months rental that comes in the form of a bank guarantee. You also need to make provision for working capital because businesses don't break even in the first month anymore. They maybe only break even in month 6. So you need to make provision for those shortages over the first 6 months through a working capital facility. And quickly you will find that your 3 million setup is no longer 3 million, but it's actually 4 million. And then again, coming back to the cash flow, is then to actually do a very realistic cash flow. It's easy to say that this business will do R1 million turnover per month, and let's say you are selling burgers, but how many burgers must you sell per day, per week, to actually make R1 million turnover per month?
Yes.
And then to make sure that you can still cover your costs in that business as well. Where compared to if you look at an existing business, let's say it's an existing franchisee and I want to expand into a second and a third business, there you know already that your franchisee has got the skills. They've got the business acumen to run a business, and there's also an opportunity where we actually can unlock the enterprise value of the existing business to fund further expansion or to actually look at financing your upgrade or revamp in your business, because that's normally something that happens every 4 to 5 years in the franchise world as well. And then compared to where maybe you've reached a stage of maturity where you eventually maybe want to exit the business, and how do you manage that wealth after maybe selling your business as well. But I think it's important to determine where in that whole life cycle you are, and then actually how we will solution for that.
And you've actually, answered part of the next question that I was going to ask, because I really wanted to know, day one of a business and year two, for example, looks completely different. And I wanted to ask, and you've mentioned, for example, hidden costs that you should consider exiting the business as well. But what else should we be considering that we may not think of initially when it comes to funding and financing? Let's just say from year 2, 3 going forward, once the business is hopefully sort of stable.
I think the big thing is, as I mentioned with the revamps and upgrades, is that you shouldn't be, let's say, taking all your profits at month end. You need to have some sort of an investment fund where you build up a kitty for those more difficult times as well. And you also need to look out for the seasonality of your specific business, because in wholesale, retail and franchise, there are certain peaks that you need to cater for and that you need to make provision for. And then you need to have sufficient cash flow to make provision for that. I think it's also important to especially if you're expanding, again, not to make an emotional decision, because a lot of business owners think after being successful with the one business that the next one will automatically be
successful as well.
And they choose locations that sometimes that doesn't make sense. And that's maybe where like a pocket flow becomes very important, because then you can actually analyze and see what's happening in another area before you make that big investment to actually invest extra money into another business.
You see, it's always good to have experts advising you, because, for example, something like renovations and revamps is something that I would have never have thought of to consider. When I think of growth, I would have thought, if it's a franchise, perhaps a second location, more staff, but there are other things and other costs that you have to consider in that journey. Now, franchising, as we traditionally know it, is, usually a brick and mortar store. It could be a burger brand, for example. I won't mention any, but things have changed now. It is 2026, and online platforms and digital shopping have become so common now. I mean, those platforms are exploding. We see it, for example, when it's Black Friday, where a lot of people opt to purchase online as opposed to going to the store. So, what exciting opportunities do you see for SMEs who want to enter the digital space?
So I think, and that has been one of the, let's call it, positives of COVID-19. Because pre-COVID, online in South Africa wasn't really a big platform to do your sales through. Now, with all the online or e-commerce opportunities, I think you mentioned earlier Facebook. Marketplace, how people promote their business and products on Facebook. But social media advertising, if you look at TikTok, people advertising there, or Instagram and so forth. So it's not just your normal channels that they're using. So I think from that perspective, it creates opportunities and connect people internationally, where before they were just restricted to maybe their geographical area. If you bring it back to franchising, there's some of these businesses where pre-COVID they were doing 80% of their sales on walk-ins and 20% on deliveries. If you look at the quick service restaurant industry, 60-70% of their sales are now all deliveries, and 30 or 40% is maybe walk-ins. So and that convenience factor became so important now. Is where you work from home, and sometimes you get 2, 3, 4 different deliveries from 2, 3, 4 different retailers or service providers. So it made the market also more competitive, because there's now a lot more opportunities. But I think also going online and using the various platforms, it made our consumers more educated as well, because they now know what is available out there at what cost. They can look at reviews and see where to shop and not to shop. So it still becomes, customer service is still important, even though it happens online, because you still need to deliver the right product at the right time, at the right price.
Yes. Almost can't even remember a time before food delivery services, in terms of what we would do then. But I guess, there weren't many options apart from getting up and driving out. How important is the collaboration and partnership between banks and, for example, tech companies as well as different brands in terms of helping entrepreneurs grow?
Yeah, so I think it's very important, because if you look at banks in general, banks are quite conservative. They've got quite strict compliance and governance that you need to follow. So it becomes important for them to partner with fintech companies, and fintech companies is much more flexible, agile, quick to move, and out of the box when it comes to connecting ecosystems with each other. But you will always need a bank in the background where a client need to transact through and make payments from. So using tech companies or fintechs is becoming more and more important to connect the dots between a bank and consumers and businesses out in the market.
Okay, so I know that the next question is a bit of a broad question, but if you were to look into a crystal ball, 5 years from now, what do you think the differentiating factor would be between franchises that make it and franchises that don't?
So I think there's always one golden thread, and in any business, and any business owner needs to stay close to their business. If you're absent from the business, then you will actually see it in the financial results of that business. So whether the business is online or whether the business is bricks and mortar, it is still going to be very important to be involved in your business. And a franchise business is no other than any independent type of business. As I mentioned in the beginning, brand is one of the benefits that you have, but you still need to put in the same hard work to make that business successful. I think the second thing for me is becoming data-led and to understand the data in your business and use that to the benefit of your business. It might mean that you will need a smaller shop. You don't need that 300, 400, 500 square meter shop. A 200 square meter shop might be more than enough to run your business from, because your sales has moved now online. So therefore, you don't have that or need that big space anymore, because people don't come to the business itself. So I think, and then and there's a couple of interesting things happening that they're piloting globally. But where you look at maybe making use of less people and more technology in terms of cashierless till points, where you literally scan and pay for your goods where there's no cashier present. And then obviously having certain technology in place to make sure that there's no theft and those type of things happening. I mean, they're already piloting the likes of drone deliveries. So that will reduce maybe the scooters.
Very interesting.
On the roads. But that brings other challenges as well. If you start seeing a lot of drones flying around and so forth. But I think, the digital evolution is here, and you need to make sure that you stay ahead of the curve.
Adapt or die, as they say in business. Okay, and then I just want to go back to access to funding, because this is always a big conversation, especially as a small business owner. Now, from Absa's perspective, where are franchise owners or just business owners in general currently feeling the most pressure when it comes to finance?
So I think a big challenge for them is obviously especially if it's a startup. There's quite a significant own contribution requirement, because to set up a franchise type business is more expensive than setting up an independent business, because you've got to comply with the franchise rules and regulations in terms of the quality of the equipment, the signage that you put up, and so forth. So that actually makes it a bit more expensive to set up. But as mentioned again, you've got the benefit of the brand. And so the owner's contribution is a bit of a challenge. And then I think the second part is then if you look at security, so there sometimes is a request to provide tangible security to reduce the risk when financing a business. Now, at the moment, the risk is more, your interest rate becomes more, and it does have an impact on your repayments every month, and it has an impact on the cash flow of your business every month. And if you offer security, obviously your interest rate is lower, and it has a positive effect on your cash flow. So I think from a banking perspective, when it comes to lending, those are the two major challenges that franchise businesses, but I think businesses in general face in South Africa.
And then on the flip side, where are the real opportunities?
Look, I think you need to look at from a banking perspective now.
Yes, from a banking perspective.
So I think the big opportunity is if you are an established franchise business owner, something that we notice now over the last couple of years, that there's a big trend in the industry where franchisors also prefer to give opportunities to existing franchisees, because they don't have to train them again, and they obviously know what they get in terms of operators of businesses. Because for franchisors, it's also not good to have failures, because it does impact the brand. So from a banking perspective, what we look at is what I mentioned earlier, is to unlock the enterprise value of these businesses. So normally after 4 or 5 years, the business is paid off in full, but you sit there with some goodwill. So if you want to open that second or third or fourth, we look at the enterprise value, and we can actually fund up to 100% the expansion that you want to do, as long as the group's gearing still remains in that 50% ratio. So we started promoting a product, franchise unlock facility, to enable existing franchise owners to actually grow their wealth by unlocking that enterprise value.
All right. And then on the 25th of February, just a few days from now, we do have the national budget speech. And of course, after the budget speech, we tend to try decipher the information and what it means for us just as normal citizens. But how much does that moment and the decisions that are made there actually influence the real world outlook for business owners and franchise owners?
Yeah, the budget speech is normally every year. It's quite a big event because it's got quite a big impact on business in general. And it has a direct impact on certain businesses because if you look at something like the fuel levy don't just only impact the consumers out there, it impacts the whole value chain, all the way from our agribusiness clients, the farmers, through to manufacturing, transport, logistics, and eventually to the retailers out there. Because the increase in the fuel price means there's an increase in the input cost to deliver products on the table of the consumers. Also, if you look at things like the sugar tax, it has a direct impact on the cost of sugary type of drinks. And that impacts restaurants, quick service restaurants, and even liquor outlets. Another one that has got quite a big impact is then also the sin taxes. Because if you're a liquor outlet and they increase the sin taxes, it means that your selling price automatically increases, and it does impact the disposable income eventually in the open market that the consumers have available to actually spend at your store. So it means that your turnover might stay the same or even increase, but you are actually selling less. And I think then the one that currently that everyone is waiting to hear what is going to happen is VAT. Because if there's an increase in VAT, it also have a negative impact on disposable income, and it increases the sales price of goods, and therefore consumers can then buy less than what they normally can buy. And I think then for business in general, the company's tax does also have an influence. So if there's an increase on company tax, then obviously it has a negative impact on the profitability of business in general, and that also as a business owner can sometimes be a concern to them.
So it's very clear that with everything that we've spoken about, whether it's banking, the budget speech, franchising, that there are real opportunities and real challenges that present themselves. To anyone who's looking to start a business, anyone who's looking to open a franchise and maybe perhaps a bit afraid to take that leap of faith, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, now I think a very good question. And if I look at what happened over the last couple of years, and if I look at 30 years ago when I started in franchising, how many franchise brands were around and how many franchise businesses were around and how that grew over the last couple of years. Franchising is a significant contributor to the GDP of our country, more than 15%, and that has grown significantly over the last 30 years and so. So, if you do have sufficient cash lying around and you want to step into a business, franchising is still a safer option. More than 80% of franchise businesses are successful after the first 3 years, compared to only 20% if you look at independent businesses. And I've seen a lot of new entrants into the market that actually do very well for themselves, and to create personal wealth, but also to create opportunity for the economy, and to also assist in addressing our unemployment crisis that we have in the country.
James, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your insights, for sharing your perspective as well, and just for the valuable practical solutions that you've offered to business owners today. And that is Mr. James Noble, who is the Sector Executive for Wholesale, Retail and Franchise at Absa Business Banking. He has joined us today on SME PowerTalk. I am Ndando Shabalala. Until next time, keep growing, keep building, and keep powering forward.